There's Gwydion's Astral Coffeehouse, which is the oldest one and the dearest to my heart and the least popular and the most weird.
When I was a 20-year-old Hyris, the one who guards the temple in the west, I used to have dreams pretty regularly of demons of various kinds that I needed to battle in various ways. Sometimes it was a matter of throwing energy at them and dealing with whatever they threw at me. And other times it was a matter of elevating my own vibration so as to become invisible to them. Once it meant flying up into the starry sky and invoking Thoth, then diving down to defeat a group of invisible bad guys around a swimming pool. One particular night, there was a sort of tournament. I was up against one after another after another. After defeating what seemed to be the final boss, I floated upward into a kind of white zone. I briefly lost my conscious awareness, and when things came back into focus, I was standing on a residential street. I knew I was still dreaming and began doing my usual tests to confirm it. From the time I was 6 years old, my primary test to see whether or not I was dreaming was to look at a sign or a printed word, then look away or close my eyes, then look at it again. Every time, the word would change. If I looked at my digital watch and saw that it was 8:30, then looked away and looked back, it might say something like 5FQ. So I looked at the street sign there, closed my eyes for a few seconds, and opened them again. But the street name didn't change. This blew my mind, as I was certain, beyond any doubt, that this was a dream, but the dream wasn't following the rules. I found a map on a wall of the city I was in, closed my eyes, and looked again. I did this several times, but even the complex map remained the same. I had to find out how this was possible, so I found my way to the main city center and went into a kind of capitol building or city hall. I saw a machine there and stood for a while trying to memorize every detail so I could draw it when I awoke. I saw a ballroom full of people dancing and somehow knew that in their waking lives, these people spent the majority of their time hunched over computers. I was eventually able to talk to the woman who seemed to be in charge of the city. She was very concerned, asking me how I had gotten there, saying I didn't belong there. She explained that the city was kept intact and solid, exactly as it was, through the collective will of the Sea Org, the upper echelons of the Church of Scientology. She swore me to secrecy, then told me I had to leave. Some people walked me to the Delta Flyer from Star Trek Voyager. I boarded it alone, and it lifted off automatically and up into the sky. As I looked back at the city, I saw that the city was on its own small planetoid, a spherical world just big enough for the city, far smaller than any moon. It was more like a small asteroid, but spherical, but the gravity was like Earth's. It being the astral plane, there was no need for it to adhere to our laws of physics, of course. As I looked ahead to where the Delta Flyer was taking me, I saw what appeared to be the Enterprise D, though it might have been any 24th century Galaxy-class starship, I suppose. As soon as the flyer reached the docking port, I woke up in my bed. Needless to say, this dream had quite an effect on me. Or at least it stayed with me for a very long time. Shortly afterward, I read Scott Peck's novel called In Heaven as on Earth. In it, There was a similar concept put forth. Spoilers ahead for that book, by the way. The protagonist dies in the beginning. He finds himself in a room, which he later finds to be part of a complex, many rooms connected by hallways. He learns that this place is kind of sort of equivalent a little bit to the idea of purgatory. It's a waiting area for souls to get used to no longer having a body and to receive a kind of orientation before they can move on, if they can move on, to a higher level where they work in harmony with other souls, the collective of their harmonious designs being, in a sense, God. Scott Peck was Christian, but he had some pretty far-out ideas. In the book, he asks his guides how that place came to exist. It is explained to him that the place is being constantly willed into existence by a sort of committee of souls that have graduated beyond it. Their collective will for it to exist allows it to remain solid, exactly as it is, to serve as a tool by which the recently deceased can get their bearings. With both the dream and that book in mind, when I made the final revisions to Second Fruit, I described the room that Joe, Luke, and Lucy interact in with the words, quote, "Here in this place, things were solid like on earth. Somehow those that came and went from this place were so very fixated on things being the way they were there that the place never changed form, never faded away." End quote. I imagined, or maybe reasoned, that these fixed places could be brought into being intentionally or unintentionally, for a purpose or for no purpose at all. Here's an example. Do you remember your old high school? Do you remember where you had lunch, the tables, and what was around you? See, that place is solid for you. If I had to guess, I'd say that you've probably had at least a few dreams take place in that setting. Back in the cult, as well as in ancient Greece, we would intentionally build palaces, temples, and buildings of various kinds within our minds for various purposes. With all of these things in mind, in 2003, I wrote the part of the New World Empire where Charles the Grey creates a coffeehouse with the form of mirrored pyramids on islands. At the time, I was doing my best to make it ambiguous and unclear whether this was a virtual space, which is pretty boring, lame, and derivative, or an astral space, which I felt would be more intriguing. After I wrote that chapter, I wanted it to be seen, visualized, and thought about by so many people that it would become one of those places that exist in a solid state in the astral. Imagine you were at the Great Pyramid at Giza, standing in front of it, looking up at it from beside your camel. See, even if you've never been there, that image is solid, unchanging. You could easily visit it in a dream, a daydream, or a guided pathworking. With this in mind, I changed the name of my website from Second Fruit to Gwydion's Astral Coffeehouse and created a YouTube channel and a Facebook group with the same name. The Facebook group's description read, quote, "Gwydion's Astral Coffeehouse is located in a plot graciously donated by the Lincoln to improve local morale and enhance aesthetic and diversity in the mid to lower astral plane, and can be reached by way of any door. The first time you visit the coffee house, you must first create it. To do so, in your mind's eye, simply activate the ocean presetting. Smell the salt water in the air. Feel the mist. Good. As if you're standing on a beach, but there's no beach, just water in all directions. and you're hovering above it. Good. Now proclaim, "Let there be mountains arising from the waters, thin ones, almost like cones, but not quite. 30 of them. No, 150. Spaced throughout the... Yeah, perfect. Now erase everything in this grid higher than 50 meters, except for me, of course, and the stars. Nothing inhibiting their light. Let the flat tops of these mountains be coated with marble. No, malachite. Increase malachite luminosity by 15%. And let there be pyramids at the centers of each of them with a diameter that allows for a minimum of 2 meters of floor space before the drop-off. And let the pyramids be made of sandstone bricks. Smaller bricks. Mirrors. That's better. Let there be 3 portals on each wall of every pyramid. And let one on each be open to one other pyramid, such that they all be connected. And let the remaining doors lead to the most popular public areas in the astral at any given moment, with the option for the customer to command the door to his or her own home, or to a destination of their choosing, which is either public or where he or she is invited. Now, place elegant, appropriate for coffee houses, tables and chairs throughout the floor space. No, like the inside of a coffee house. Better. If someone jumps off the edge, let them hover or fly. Actually, make the sky change according to the time of day in real-time Terra, Los Angeles, and the color saturation of the sky and the ocean and of everything here except the people who come and go, exaggerated by 150%. Good. You're here. Welcome. Due to underdeveloped technology, visitors must provide their own coffee. End quote. Gwydion's Astral Coffeehouse, the YouTube channel, and the Facebook group are both still there if you want to search for them, but I'm not as active on them as I used to be. So, now you know my secret. Some publish from a desire for fame and fortune. Me, I want to be able to visit the coffee house long after I shuffle off this proverbial Shakespearean cliche, even if I lose consciousness or lucid awareness for a period of time. A sort of safety net made from the collective visualization of others, and then to use it to travel anywhere I wish in the astral, from heaven to hell, to 1920s Paris, or Superman's Fortress of Solitude, the 80s version, or Dune, the 80s version, of course, always the 80s version. So, 12 years after writing the bit about Charles the Great creating this maybe astral coffee house, 12 years in which I used the coffee house as a device in various forms of art, I finally decided to begin writing about the coffee house as it was originally, created by Charles the Great in the New World Empire story. This meant a few things. It meant that, at least in that context, I had to more or less commit to it at least originating in virtual reality. However, if it was to be interdimensional, it requires too much suspension of disbelief to think of it as a virtual space. Then one might assume that all of the worlds one visits through the doors on the pyramid are also virtual. And then again, if it were astral, one might assume one could not pass through one of its doors and arrive in any kind of physical realm. At first, what I went with was that it originated in virtual space, but that Charles the Grey, being Venusian, was somehow able to find a way to allow the pyramid doors to access other dimensions. Later, In 2022, when I was publishing it for the first time, not counting the podcast, I was able to tie in the divine aspect of Job as being the incarnation of Luke, son of God and the devil, to add a mysterious element to the otherwise hard science fiction story. This came in the form of the rectangle. Charles slowly walked into the caves at the base of Maxwell Montes and found the path with the torches on either side. He arrived at the end and saw his old friend's nails had grown long again. Job was the only human to set foot on Venus for longer than a few minutes since the days of the Fathoms long before. His body was now frail, ribs visible, eyes sunken, and his hair was long and gray. He'd sat in that spot like the Buddha for nearly 400 Venusian years. Charles knelt down and began to trim his old friend's nails. "Needst not bother," Job said slowly, quietly. "I've not heard thy speech for years," Charles replied. "Have a gift for thee," Job said. He raised his right hand, extended his fingers, and there before him appeared a shimmering rectangle. It was about 2 meters high, 1 meter wide, with absolutely no depth. Its color was blacker than black from the front to the back, and it disappeared when viewed from the side. "What is it?" Charles asked. "'Tis the thing," old Job said wearily. "I came into this world." He inhaled very slowly and said, "To give," were the words of his final breath. End of flashback. After many years of experimentation, Charles had discovered that, having no depth, the rectangle could fit between any two worlds, at any 2 points in time. Further, it could slide between them all without harming any of them. In doing so, he discovered that the rectangle itself could be used as an anchor and a memory outside of any universe. So there was no longer any need for him to rely on the human's cloud. The rectangle itself could also be used as a portal for any being to walk between any two places, times, or universes. He found a way to use the rectangle in 12 places at once. He placed 3 of them on each side of the sandstone pyramid below him on the lone island surrounded by the vast sea. This is the part that I wrote in February of 2022. Job, the incarnation of Luke, admits that the reason he came into this world, much to the chagrin of his parents, God and the devil, was to give the world, by way of Charles the Grey, the rectangle. And in this usage, the world means not only multiple planets, Venus and Earth, but the whole universe, all universes, and all universe types in the past, present, and future. I'll admit that this scene was, in part, influenced by something a little silly. I had recently begun playing Zelda Breath of the Wild, and was moved almost to tears by the ancient monks waiting for Link to arrive at various cave dwellings, those underground tests of valor and such, who then give Link their spirit orbs and vanish into thin air. I think it hit me because it reminded me of Gordon, and processing it all, it occurred to me that this would be a wonderful way to bring the interdimensional coffeehouse out of the realms of virtual reality, however advanced and 27th century it may be, and into the realm of the mysterious, the otherworldly, even the divine. In the New World Empire universe, the 7th century of the Age of Aquarius was to be given a doorway out. One might ask, What does someone's natal chart look like if they're born on Venus? Well, if you're using heliocentric astrology, it's the same as if they were born on Earth, but the rectangle makes all of these points moot, opening the doorway wide into infinity. When Job arrived on Venus, he gave a cube, 3 dimensions containing all the knowledge that was available to give. When he left the mortal realm, he gave the rectangle, 2 dimensions, which thwart all the rules previously established, containing infinity within itself, and access to all points on every timeline and points on all lines even beyond time as we know it. Charles the Great took the rectangle and used it to duplicate itself within itself, and gave it the form of the coffeehouse as we know it.